Welcome back to the Baseball Podcast. We're joined today by Dan Boyce. He's the owner and founder of AussieHoopla.com. He's an Australian basketball expert, and I wanted to get Dan's thoughts because of the current crisis in the Australian Baseball League right now. And Dan, you don't have to be a baseball fan to talk about it, but I kind of wanted to get if you can just break down the National Basketball League, that's basketball in Australia. If you can break down how that has come to relevancy and then what that looks like in Australia becoming a notable sport when it wasn't before that. Because I think the path for the Australian Baseball League is to try and take a page out of the NBL's book. So, Dan, why don't you just introduce yourself? Plug whatever you got, by the way. All 10 of our listeners, I'm sure, will definitely sign up. And yeah, let us know your thoughts on the NBL if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. Well, AussieHoopla.com, you're right, that's our thing. At Aussie Hoopla on Twitter, at Aussie Hoopla on Instagram. But yeah, basically we're a podcast. All we talk about is Aussie hoops, and if you've played Aussie hoops in the NBA or Australia and you're from Australia, then generally you've been on the show. So over 300 podcasts there with all of Australia's main players and coaches. That's what we do. If that interests you, check us out. But back to your question around the league, it is definitely possible. I mean, the NBL has gone through a number of lifespans and growth stages and models. So, which I'll take you through. So, I think that there's feasibility for multiple models that has allowed the NBL to be sustainable over the years that could potentially be applied. But yeah, not a huge knowledge base of baseball, so I'll
That's
defer to
okay.
you, Ethan, on a few of those things. But the history of the NBL that started off as and I guess the infrastructure of basketball was a little bit different to baseball, considering every city in Australia pretty much has a basketball stadium and multiple stadiums for a lot of that part, especially now that it's booming. But even back then, in the 70s and 80s, there was a big boom there. I guess we had the Olympics here in 1956, and a lot of Americans came over after that. We had teachers here. We had a bit of Mormons that come through here, and it's just that I guess filtration of Americans combined with the growth of the NBA. Like, I mean, that's, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson sort of coming in the 80s and that booming from there onwards. Things sort of started to have a bit of a groundswell around here. Plus, Australia's always punched above its weight when it comes to sport, and during the 60s, 70s, and even early 80s, we were always fairly decent at the Olympics and world competition compared to other countries. America always above and beyond, of course. But because the Olympics encompasses all the different regions, you'd always have like an Australia or an Asia region, and Australia, when you compare it to New Zealand and China and all those things around those times, when let's be honest, China wasn't even playing professional sports in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So it was a pretty thin group to be the top performer at, and so all those things sort of combined. And then so there was multiple grassroots leagues getting about 1979. They decided to launch a national league. And through a few different associations, primarily the one based down there in Newcastle, the league began. Now, funnily enough, at that time, even though the NBL kicked off and 1979 was first season, it was probably around, say, 3 or 4 seasons before that competition was even the best in Australia. So Victoria, Melbourne, that's the hotbed for basketball. Even now, probably say 2/3 of the registered basketball players in Australia are in Victoria. So Victoria is and always has been the hotbed for basketball. Nearly all the NBA guys come from Victoria, all those type of things. The Victorian Basketball League was actually the top tier one. It's where most of the good teams were based, or the good associations, where the good stadiums were. It was basically where it's the second highest populated city in Australia. So a lot of the Americans that had come over here. A lot of them teachers, like I said, back in the early '80s. They were around here, and because they're teachers, not only were they wanting to play basketball and stay competitive, but they're also, they've got a natural knack for coaching and passing on lessons and whatnot. So around about 83, 84, that's when it really became, the top tier league. A number of teams from the Victorian Basketball Association joined the NBL. 1984 is when the Melbourne Tigers joined, which would go on to be, a pretty major franchise. But yeah, so the growth, that's a bit of a backstory on the history, but the growth and how that then developed into, I guess, what we would call the first golden era for basketball came. It was funny enough, like I mentioned him off air. I'm not sure what his involvement is, but Bob Turner come into play around this time, where he was an American, and he introduced concepts to the NBL like marketing, corporate boxes, corporate sponsorship, like all these things before 1984 didn't really exist. It was just like, hey, we've got a basketball association, we have kids come and play. We've got junior program, and then there's like a senior program, and then if you play in that association, if you're in the senior program, well, you're here playing for, let's say the Melbourne Tigers. But we want to play against the team next door, the Eltham Wildcats, and the team next door, the Nunawading Spectres, and the Geelong Supercats, and whatever it might be. So it was all pretty much grassroots type of thing that kicked that off. But then, yeah, 1984, that was when, things like and it's no different. It mirrored a lot of the growth of the NBA. Like during that time, you've got the rise of ESPN. You've got the Michael Jordan on Wheaties packets and Coca-Cola, and Converse is sponsoring Magic Johnson, Larry Bird. Like all these marketing opportunities. We're always a few years behind America. Don't get me wrong. So let's say in the sort of 86 to 1990 period is when, yeah, we saw teams being sponsored, or at least having some type of income driven by brands, and that also then led to, still at this time where the teams are pretty much playing out of, for the most part, local associations, tin shed. We're talking about stadiums with tin roofs and pretty modest seating, less than 2,000 fans, pretty much for most of these type of games. Probably not too much different than most community colleges or something like that you guys got over there. And then, yeah, that got TV came along. Again, all of this coinciding with the rise of basketball. Nike, Michael Jordan, all that type of stuff. ESPN, basketball really went on a boom, and because you couldn't easily see the NBA, but you could hear about it. Basketball cards started to become a thing, and the NBL just took off. Like it was also like there wasn't easy, like football and cricket have been the biggest sports back then. The league was played in winter, so it competed with Australian football. But then, but yeah, what it was, I guess, those people who we saw a lot of immigration start to sort of come through at that time as well. So basketball really took off for a number of different factors. And then by 1992 to 95, basketball was, rapidly growing. The AFL actually sat down and had clear strategic meetings about the growth of basketball. It was the fastest growing sport in Australia. They had meetings around how they become sustainable and pivot and change what they're doing to compete against the rise of basketball, both from an eyeballs and a fan's perspective that they were taking away, to also the fact that that both sports are pretty fast, athletic. You require pretty much the same type of person for that. So a lot of the junior players were being taken away from that, and even from, if we look at those times to now, basketball as a junior sport has pretty much been the biggest sport in Australia. That and soccer. Like soccer's grown over time, but since then, basketball has been one of the top two youth participation sports in Australia. But yeah, so they sat down, they changed a number of things. The AFL and that went on another growth trajectory. And I guess the changes that come into play next. So basketball this time is huge. Teams have moved out of tin sheds. They're in 15-seat stadiums. There are still some smaller cities. So it's a bit of a well, this will probably come into play later. So it's a little bit of a what do you call it? It's a bit of a two-tier model. You're either a team like Sydney Kings or the Melbourne Tigers, who are playing in 15,000 seat stadiums, 12,000 seat stadiums, sorry, 1,200 seat stadiums. Or you're a team, let's say, it's in a small regional area like the Illawarra Hawks, 3,000 seat stadium, Geelong Supercats, 2,000 seat stadium. There's this two-tier competition, and and what this started to, and this problem is what has doomed basketball, or went on to, well, this was part of what doomed basketball for the next, probably say 15 years, because right now basketball is hot. It's like people still talk about it now as in the glory days. NBL Grand Finals, we're getting 18,000 people to the games. So this is really basketball as big as it is now. It's probably as big as it was then, but it's probably it would be more. It would, in the same way we were talking about WWE earlier. Like the WWE is probably as big as it was in the 90s. It's probably not even as big, but it's more profitable. And the NBL's the sort of mirrors the same sort of thing. It's more profitable now, but it's really probably only as big, if not, like crowds are kind of similar to what it was then. So what happened? Yeah, I guess there's two major factors that stand out. One of those is the having both those larger programs and those smaller regional programs. It became impossible for the two to coexist. Like think about a team at the time. Let's say like there was three teams: the Geelong Supercats, the Hobart Devils in Tasmania, and the Newcastle Falcons. So all those small regional teams, they're generating say 2 to maybe 4,000 people. They're playing in stadiums with 2 to 4,000 seats, and they can't spend the same amount of money to be competitive as what Sydney and Melbourne can. Now the problem with Sydney and Melbourne is that they need to have big names. For example, like the Sydney Kings, we were talking about 92, 93. They brought in the guy. Won an NCAA championship with Villanova, played a little bit in the NBA with Indiana, Dwayne McClain, and he came in because at this time, watching the NBA wasn't really feasible. We didn't have any easy way to see that. He became Australia's Michael Jordan. He was on, he had his own shoe deal from Reebok. He had his own shoe. He had, he was a sponsor. Sorry, he was marketing Coca-Cola and things like that. So everything on a much smaller scale, but the things that you were seeing Michael Jordan do, he was doing here in Australia for a couple of years, and so they needed big money invested in players like that to get to enough people to fill a 10,000, 12,000 seat stadium, right? And so it becomes like what works for one doesn't work for the other. Like if we don't spend as much money so that these smaller regional teams can survive, well, the Melbournes and Sydneys can't get enough people in the stadium to pay stadium costs. But then if the Melbourne and the Sydney spend a whole heap of money to drive heaps of fans to their games, those smaller teams can't, like they're having like 0 and 22 seasons, and they can't compete. They're getting smashed.
Yeah.
So 96 is when those three teams I mentioned just as the examples drop out: Geelong, Hobart, and who did I miss? Gold Coast. And Newcastle. All those drop out in the next couple of years. And then, we see this period where the NBL makes a decision. Again, this is the second part of the big difference maker. It makes a decision to say, well, if we want to grow, we can't really compete. We play in winter with AFL football. Football is always going to be king there. There's also rugby league. Rugby league's the biggest sport in the winter in New South Wales and Queensland. It's a really saturated market. In summer, really all there is cricket. There's this, and they speak to some TV companies. They lost their TV rights, and some TV companies had said, if you move to summer, we'll put you guys on TV because we've got not really much to go there. So NBL did this investigation. It was highly criticised at the time, but the NBL moved to summer, and now it's in summer. It's where it sits today. This is the downfall of the NBL for two reasons. One, it was always difficult to struggle that large city, regional city, major city, regional city model. In the US, it's a lot easier because there's so many major cities. You can just turn around and say, well, we'll just make the NBA and it's just for major cities, right? But in Australia, major cities make up maybe four teams, right? So, and you can't have a league with four teams, right? So you need the regional teams in there some way, somehow. Um, so this is where things are at in, say, like 19. Well, the league switches to summer in 1999. And from there, it goes into a dark period because, yeah, you've got these teams, because of that financial issue, you've got teams that are falling out of the league. You've got teams that come into the league and try and be sustainable, but then they drop out over, a period of 2 or 3 years. In fact, if you look at that period, that 15 to 20 year period, there are more teams that enter and exit the league than actually stay in the league during that time. So we're talking about sort of maybe like 9, 10, 12 teams that have franchises enter the league, can't be sustainable for all those type of reasons and drop out. And the other part of it is that, and what's contributing to this is that summer, what people didn't, I guess, counter for in all their planning is, although, hey, we don't have any issues from football and rugby, Australia's two biggest TV sports at the time. We can basically be number two here with only cricket there and anything else as a bonus. What they didn't count for is just the way that Australia operates, which I think is maybe somewhat. I don't want to say. I'll let you guys maybe fill us in. But in Australia, in the summer, everyone goes to the beach, and what basketball couldn't compete with. Right? I mean, cricket's one thing and whatever else, but what basketball found it couldn't compete with, it wasn't football and it wasn't rugby. It's going to the beach and having a barbecue. Right? It's a lot harder to get people to come to the basketball when their options are seeing friends in the warm sun at the beach having a barbecue than it is to convince them to watch NBL or basketball over football. So those two things saw a massive decline in fan attendance. We saw a massive decline in, revenue. Teams, again, like I said, dropping out of the league can't be sustainable. You'd have a team pop up, an example, or you'd have a number of teams sort of like fall out of the league, come back, fall out of the league, come back. One comes to mind is there was a team in Canberra. It was long established, but it fell out of the league because it couldn't compete financially. The license moved to Newcastle, where they'd had a team before under a different brand name. They were there for 2 seasons, then dropped out. So you've got all these major cities. I mean, they're not the big four, but you've got these major cities where, oh hey, I'm a Falcons fan. Oh, my team folded. Oh, we don't have any basketball for 3 years. Oh, now we've got another team. They're called the Pirates. Oh, that folded in 2 years. Now, those areas couldn't develop or maintain a regular interest in the sport or a regular fan base. And at this time, what happened is all these things contributed to the picture I painted to you about this two-tier ecosystem. Basketball Australia, they couldn't get any sponsorship. The TV deal that they were promised fell through. They never really got on TV. And so the only TV they got was like the ABC, which is kind of like maybe a PBS, like a public broadcast station.
I was just about to say that. That's like kind of like lame, right?
Yeah. So it was on there. They're only playing one game a week. Not too many people watch it back then. And the Australian Basketball Association, which is like the governing body, kind of like your FIBA, but just for Australia. So Basketball Australia, it steps in. It says, all right, we're taking control of the league. It's in the same position that you're saying baseball is now with, it's unsustainable. Yeah. Teams are falling out. So we're gonna take control. And what it does is it flips it around. So it says it implements. I won't go into too much detail, but it implements this player points system, which basically means that or you could pay players whatever you kind of wanted, but each player had a number of points that they determined, and your team can only have so many points. Yeah, maybe a little bit like fantasy sports or something, really, right?
Yeah.
But I can dive into it. But what happened as a result of this, probably the easiest way to explain it is that Australia has import players. Yeah. And so if you have an import player, he's usually your highest paid player. You bring him across, he's an American player, whatever, a big college player. And commonly what the teams bring in is an American import point guard. because they're usually the best players for us. I'm sure there's some parallels maybe within baseball, but there's so many players that are excellent, should be in the NBA, but the problem is they're 5'7", they're not 6'2", right?
Right.
So
Bryce Cotton.
Bryce Cotton
Yeah.
is one. There's the list is massive. Like all of our great players, Derek Rucker, Darryl McDonald, Ricky Grace, like anyone who would be considered in the top, like Parker Jackson Cartwright's there this year. The list of great Australian play, well, great NBL players, shouldn't say Australian, great NBL players. The list of guys who are American point guards between 5'5" and 6'1" is 50% of the list, right? That's pretty much what it is. So
Yeah.
it's
I think the
always been.
baseball equivalent of this would be there are some guys we know a couple of them who have gone over and played in the ABL and like they're really good. I know one guy, he's on my current men's league team who has an absolutely disgusting slider. Like it's MLB quality. The problem has always been that his fastball is like 84 miles an hour, which will never play in MLB.
Yeah.
So it's like he goes over to Australia, he's really good. So,
Yep.
yeah, they are doing the same thing. They're bringing in foreign guys and, I
Exactly.
think they're
And so,
trying to stay away from having the foreign guys just run the league.
yeah. And so what teams would do is they'd usually pick up a point guard that was 10 points because, everyone's given a point out of 10. The system was something like 74 points, I think, for a team, right? So you do that, and then you grab another import. Quite commonly, it was kind of like a power forward because we could never afford to pay those good college players that didn't make the NBA that were centers. They'd always go to Europe for bigger money, but we'd be able to get a pretty good power forward that could do the job here. You'd put another 10 points on him, and then what happened is you try and whatever money you'd have left, you try and divide that across the league, and obviously you're going to spend that on starters. The outcome of all this basically meant that those guys that were, let's say, 6th, 7th, 8th man on NBL teams weren't able to fit them into their rosters because you'd load up on your starting lineup, whatever's left, you'd grab teams, and if a player was worth, say, 6 points or 7 points or something like that, you literally couldn't fit him in with the points. You'd have to go,
the middle gets squeezed.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because you want all tens and then fill it with ones.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah. You go 10, 10, 10, 9, 8, 10, whatever it is, and then you fill in the rest of that out, but you've only got maybe 20 points to do that. Maybe you get a good 6-man, and then the rest of them are kind of just, you're picking up one so you can fit into there. And that's
we have to have a certain number of players. So like one.
That actually kind of happens in Major League Baseball right now, where like a guy like you're probably not gonna. If I'm going over your head, I'm sorry, but like there's a guy named Juan Soto who's like an incredible, like a generational talent. Think of him like a LeBron kind of, and he got like $700 million, $800 million this offseason. And then there are a bunch of guys that'll sign 1-year deals for $5 million, and then those kind of old school like 4-year $80 million deals are kind of going away. And it's like everybody either wants to cheap out and just try and get a guy for like less than he's worth, or spend everything they have for like an incredible guy. And nobody wants to just sign a bunch of pretty good guys.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we saw a big decline in the talent pool as well during that time. So 1988, Australia's top 4 in the Olympics. 96, we're top 4 in the Olympics. 2000, we're top 4 in the Olympics. So remember, we switched to summer 99. Yeah, so we've been, one of the top 4 teams for most of the last decade. This comes into play. Players are left without teams because they get squeezed out from the points. Because even though they might be 6th, 7th, 8th man on NBL rosters, these are still they're the guys that are pushing the top tier guys to become better, right? Like so, we lose all that talent, or usually a guy that's 6 or 7. If you think about it, what it usually is so a guy comes in, he's a rookie, he's probably worth a 1, has a big season, now he's a 6, now teams can't afford him. So players were having like all of our good youthful talent was being either driven overseas or because money was never really great, they turned around and took a job that probably paid $20K more just to work as an accountant or something like that. So this is there was a big decline in that, and the league, from a financials perspective, it created this parity where teams could all compete financially. Things became a little bit more sustainable. Your regional teams, teams like Illawarra, places like that, even Gold Coast come into the competition. They returned, so things became a little bit more feasible for them. And we still had a lot of teams coming in and out. It wasn't great. In fact, I don't think from did it make any difference into teams being able to be retained in the league? No, we saw more dropout than ever, but it probably made it easier for teams to enter the league financially, and I guess that was the hope that one of them could stick around. What happened with those big four teams, Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane, and whatever else? They couldn't. Like I said, they were either Melbourne, for example, was driven from the if you watch the Australian Open, they used to play their 1,500 seat stadium. Sorry, 15,000 people can fit into that stadium. 18,000 people, depending on how they set it up. They were driven to our state netball centre, which fits 2,500 people. They couldn't afford to keep. They didn't have, and you move into a stadium like that. Sure, there's maybe a couple of years there where people are fighting for tickets, but then, I can never get tickets, so people stop going, and then all of a sudden, that 2,500 seat stadium's getting 1,800 people enter it, and no one's watching basketball in Melbourne. Sydney and Melbourne, they drop out of the league. Our two biggest cities, both those teams are financially unstable and they drop out. And so, it's really it becomes a league where there's only 8-9 teams by this stage, again, because it's still not sustainable. But it becomes a team weighted towards the smaller teams, and the major teams can't really afford to be in there because they can't drive enough people to those bigger stadiums. Because it's so small, they can't get sponsorship. No one wants to sponsor. If I become the major sponsor, even though I'm the major sponsor, I'm seen in maybe 2 or 3 states. I'm not really seen. It doesn't make sense. So
this feels reminiscent of it. Not identical, but this feels kind of like where the ABL is at, like
correct,
currently, which is like you're losing teams. Nobody makes any money except for I think Melbourne.
I think Melbourne just lost less money.
Okay, fair enough. But
I don't think anybody. Makes
my
money.
point is, it feels like for like the analog, like this is where we're at right now with Australia baseball.
Pretty much, yeah. So there's been 2 glory and 2 very different seasons, 2 glory periods or golden eras for the NBL. Because here is when we get to like 2015. We're finishing sort of 10th, 12th in the Olympics. We're not on TV at all. There's a couple of seasons there where we're not shown on any TV station anywhere at all. This is probably around, say, 2007, things like that, 2008. And the only way you can see the games is if you can go to there. Most teams, no one would be playing. Perth was actually always fairly successful, so they were still getting maybe 10,000, but that's because Perth is kind of like Perth is like a 3-hour flight from anywhere in Australia. It's like a whole nother country by itself. It's like a whole kind of like
that's
isolated
weird.
area.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I think they still retained their TV rights for the Perth area, and people still, that was always successful. And to be honest, the money that came from Perth is probably what propped up the league for the most part during 2010, 2015. But the bigger picture is that, like, no sponsorship, minimal TV. If there was even any TV, all of our talents decrease. Where are we? We go through another. There's probably, say, 3 stints there where the league almost went under, similar to where baseball is now. And then the third one was when, we kind of had the foundation set for where we are today. Larry Kesselman then had started attending Melbourne Tigers games at that 2,000-seat stadium I told you about. He was one of the major sponsors there. He moved from that to the sponsor of the club, buying the club, and then when this kind of hit, they presented him with the idea of buying the league, and things turned around from there, which I can jump into now. But did you want to? I don't know. Did you? I've been talking for a long time.
No. You have your own podcast. You're used to it.
Yeah, I think this is sort of one of the things we wanted to get at, because this is where we're at now. Is where it sounds like Australian basketball started to like go back up again, started to recover, and that is what we're hoping for with Australian baseball.
So, Dan, that was a great breakdown of how the NBL got to where it is today. And I think if I had, and obviously no comparison is going to be perfect, but if I had to pinpoint, you said there were two golden eras of Australian basketball, and there is that with baseball too, where the 90s, I think the ABL was like pretty popular
Hmm.
comparatively. And I mean, I wasn't around for it. I'm not Australian, but the stories that I get are that games were selling out, people loved going, and the league folded in like 1999, I think. And then it came back in 2010. Major League Baseball propped it up. I think they owned 75% of it and paid a bunch of the costs. And then, like 5 years in, they pulled out. I don't know why. They just gave up. And so it went to individual franchises. And now everybody's losing money. And I think it was Major League Baseball was okay footing the bill for that. They wanted to grow the game of baseball. And Australia is like, I would say like a third tier baseball power. Like there's like the United States, Japan, Korea. Baseball is enormous. And then there are a bunch of places like Colombia and I don't know what would
Puerto
be another
Rico,
good example. Taiwan, I guess. We're like,
Mexico.
yeah, Mexico. We're like baseball's pretty big. They have a consistent stream of major leaguers, but it's not like a top tier sport or anything. And then Australia's like one below that. We're like they'll put maybe one guy a year into the major leagues, and the ABL has like a handful, maybe 10 guys with MLB experience, but for the most part, it's homegrown guys. And if I
Like
had to
Australia
pinpoint,
does really quick. Australia, I feel like at least as of the moment, might have a claim to be like the king of that third tier
yeah, definitely,
because
they're
they
like on
have
the border.
done
They
so
could, they
well on the
can.
world
I
stage.
mean, they beat Korea in the latest World Baseball Classic, which was like a huge upset. I don't know if this
Yeah.
was news in Australia at all or not, but they like made waves. They were really good. And so the baseball itself in Australia is doing pretty well, I think. And kids are playing, and they got a lot of guys in the minor leagues. But the problem is the ABL model just it seems is not working. And
Mhm.
so if I had to like pinpoint on the NBL timeline that you just gave us where the Australian Baseball League is, it seems like they're in between the golden eras, like you said, where it
Mm.
was doing really well, and now something happened. And it seems to me like the Melbourne Aces, there was a sort of tell-all interview where the guy who owned the team basically said the league doesn't make any money. In fact, it loses money every year. And we were spending extra money, us Melbourne, were spending extra money to defray the costs to other teams. And eventually we just got sick of it and we didn't want to do
Which
that
is what
anymore.
the Perth Wildcats were doing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so he basically said it's this guy named Brett Ralph, and he basically said, I I felt like the league wasn't listening to us anymore, and they wanted to do their own thing. And basically, he was saying, okay, that's fine, but I'm not going to keep footing the bill anymore. And again, this is only one man's opinion. I have no idea. I'm not in the room for these conversations.
Right.
But that kind of goes back to what you're saying of like the regional versus like big city model of you can have a place like Melbourne where it seems like it's doing relatively well, but then when you have a team in Canberra, that doesn't work. And so
Mhm.
how do you rectify these things? And so I have a couple of questions for you, and I'll just try to simplify this really fast for Americans who don't really know anything about Australian basketball. Larry Kesselman, like you said, like a billionaire, I think, or at least 100 millionaire. And I don't remember what he does. You can explain that if you want. But he is this rich guy who basically, as far as I can tell, was willing to lose money on the league for a little while, or I don't know how long it was. You tell me, but was willing to foot the bill, and now he's reaping the rewards because he stuck around long enough and propped the league up enough until it became profitable. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yeah. I can obviously there's a lot of color to be added to that.
Yeah, he's a controversial figure. I think we don't need to get into him as a person,
No,
right?
not so much. Only in the last maybe 3 to 6 months, which yeah, we can touch on at the end or something like that, because yeah, that's kind of like a flow-on effect to where things are at now. But a couple of things that I'll just add in there, and then I'll give it back to you, Ethan. Is that
Yeah.
I think to look at the baseball decline after say the late '90s and what happened there, that's going to mirror what happened with the NBL as well, from the element of us being like, I pay TV, which gave us access to ESPN and whatever else. That kind of came into the majority. It was never the majority, but when that had its boom, and people who had cable, yeah, like the pay TV here in Australia, that's
Mhm.
kind of the same time period. It's like 98, 99, 2000 is when that became like, if you were an affluent family, or you like, that was like the thing to have. It was like the new, like, it was like everyone getting a color TV, like that type of thing, right? But
Yeah.
that gave people that were baseball fans, ABL fans, now I've never been able to see American baseball or baseball from other countries. Now I can see it at home on my TV. Yeah.
Yeah.
The same thing with basketball. Like, I used to go to the NBL flat out all the time, but now I can watch NBA, like a couple of times a week on my TV. Does that impact? I mean, it does impact how many people watch the Australian Baseball League. It does impact how many people watch the Australian Basketball League. To what degree? Obviously, these will differ, but that was a big part of what happened for baseball as well, because we saw the same thing in soccer as well. Yeah, so soccer here in Australia saw a major decline. Pay TV come in. I can now see, Champions League and whatever else easily on pay TV. The decline in viewership and attendance pretty much mirrored all those three non-traditional Australian sports saw declines around that time as well. And then, just covering a bit of stuff with Larry. So yeah, Larry became a billionaire. He had a company called Dodo, which was a telecommunications company. I think maybe similar to Gecko. What's the one you've got over there with like the telecommunications company with the lizard?
Oh, Geico?
Geico? That's insurance.
Geico, yeah.
It'd be like Verizon or like AT&T.
Comcast, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
Enron.
So basically, yeah, like
no, Enron is a bad example.
Yeah, it's not Enron. Yeah. So Telstra was we only had one telephone company here in Australia up until sort of like the mid '90s and that type of thing, and then it became become open for public companies to enter the market. We had a whole range of smaller.
Oh, that happened in the United States. There was a company called Bell Telephone that got busted up as a monopoly. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So it got busted up as a monopoly. Same thing happened here. And one of those really, really small companies that was doing things really cheap was Dodo. Dodo blew up when mobile phones come in and had really cheap. So it was probably more internet plans, but yeah, really cheap internet plans. They blew up, got bought by the Telstra or the equivalent of Bell where you are, and he was a millionaire from there, had plenty of money, became a venture capitalist, and that's kind of where that comes from.
Okay, so you don't have to pretend to speak for him, but if you had to speak for him, I'll just say it like that. Larry Kesselman, it seems, is just a rich guy who likes to play with things, to make it simple, and he is willing to lose a bunch of money because he enjoys basketball. Is that what the initial pitch was?
No, there's a small element of that, but there's a much bigger piece of this, and this leads to why it's a success now. So,
okay.
Larry's a very smart businessman, a Ukrainian Jew that came over here as an immigrant and, built himself up from nothing, basically. I've got his number in my phone and we've met number of times, but I'm not going to say we're best mates or anything like that, right? but have contact with the man. And so where I'm getting to with this is that he, as anyone who makes a fair bit of money, I talked about how he made his millions from Dodo. Where do people invest their money when they've got money? Into real estate. He becomes a real estate developer. This is where things go to. Like, he's putting money into basketball really because I'll become a major sponsor. I like going with my son. I sit in the box and I watch basketball. There's 2,000 people, but he loves it and whatever else, right? That's where it starts for him. But as all these things in the basketball background happen, then all these things in his business world happen. And, talking to Larry, meeting with Larry a few times, one of the things he said to me, again, he's primarily, after the sale of Dodo, he's primarily making his money through real estate as a property developer. He's a primary property developer. When it comes to property in Australia, all the money, the majority of property investment in Australia comes from Asian buyers. People from Asia invest in Australia, and that's where it is. Now, a very poignant quote which is where I think separates. There's two things that I think separate baseball and it reclaiming, its success in basketball is what I'm about to say here, combined with the infrastructure, the venues that these sports require, because it's the same sort of with soccer and baseball sort of echo some similar things and difficulties in returning to those periods where things were big. So Larry is a property investor. He makes money from Asian investors. Asian investors don't want to talk about real estate, but what do they want to talk about? Basketball.
They do want to talk about money. I didn't realize that it was not
Sorry,
an open
I thought that was
question.
rhetorical. I was waiting for you to answer your own question. Tom comes in. Money?
Oh,
I mean, where's the lie?
Not. It's not
Honestly,
wrong, I suppose.
it's not wrong. It's not wrong. It's just another answer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so yeah, that's a quote from Larry himself. I'm trying to get through the door to speak to these these Chinese millionaires, billionaires about where they want to invest their money, and because when I say Larry's in property investment, I'm not talking about a house here or some flats here. I'm talking about one of the buildings that he finished that took close to a decade to complete. Is the largest skyscraper outside the 5-10 minutes of Melbourne CBD. So major complexes, major business districts, that type of thing. So
Not small time at all.
no, not at all. And again, like if you're a property developer and you're making money from building stuff which is 25 stories or entire business districts, where we're talking about facilities and swimming pools and housing projects or whatever. Like this isn't the stuff that not only the normal person can afford, but it's not this type of thing that most Australians can afford. Even 0.01% of Australians. So where does the money come from? This goes to you go to Asia to get this money. You get Asian backers. That's where the money comes in. You develop it. You sell it. They make a heap of money. This is like the Australian property market is very, very healthy and very profitable and has been pretty much since day dot. And it's because of that Asian financial influence that comes into there. So this we're talking about 2010, 2015. Basketball, as we know, is booming in China. Yao Ming, all those type of things going on. It's becoming their favorite sport. So yeah, like Larry said, I'm trying to get in the door with these guys. I tell them, let's chat about investing in property. They don't want to hear about it, but when they say, "Hey, let's talk about basketball," doors are opening for me. So,
Okay.
so to say that Larry invested a whole heap of money at a loss, it is correct, but he didn't do it for nothing.
It wasn't
right?
just benevolence.
Correct.
Okay.
And although for the first, let's say 5 or even 10 years, Larry's putting money into this and losing money on paper, is he making that money back through the money that's coming in through his property investments? I would say yes, but obviously I'm not privy to those financials, right?
So it's like it's like a networking tool.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like he was using
Now,
it as a loss leader. Yeah.
Correct.
now see, that's
correct.
super interesting because I didn't know any of that. And like that seems like it's like almost too perfect because outside of the United States, what are the two biggest baseball markets in the world? Korea and Japan.
Yeah.
And then Taiwan, which I guess is sort of an into China. We don't need to get into that. But
Yeah.
like that would Larry, buy the ABL.
So this is Larry Kesselman's business card.
There it is. Everybody
This
screenshot
is
that.
the back of his card, right? I don't know if you can see
Oh,
that.
he's got the NBL on there. Okay.
There it is.
The NBL is on there, but we've got a HR company, a marketing company, what do we got? We've got Oxygen Ventures, which is like another. Basically, what Larry's done from this point is, and even we talked about how there's some controversial things going on with Larry and some teams now, which we'll get into. But from here, it's all about vertical integration, right? So I have I've got my property investment, I've got my real estate company, and then so if I want to sell more real estate, I got to get property investment. So I got a property investment company, then I get Asian buyers, but how do I attract them? Well, I need marketing. So I buy a marketing company, but then I want to attract more Asian investors, so I buy the NBL. And then I use that marketing company to do all the marketing for the NBL, which is sorely lacking. A central marketing functionality to it. Then I need to sell sponsorship to the NBL. I'll create my own sales arm, which will help me to sell sponsorship for the NBL. But I can also use that to sell interest in real estate projects. So everything becomes ingrained in here, where he's now owning marketing companies, HR companies, finance, account, whatever is going to be applicable to helping him grow all of his businesses.
Right.
Those are the type of things that he's investing in, right? As well as the odd startup here and there. His son, that where he started going to watch the basketball with, as soon as he buys the NBL or invests the money into the NBL, and this is where some of these later problems start. But so he buys the NBL. Let's. I'll do a short version of this. So he buys the NBL. Well, the NBL ask him to invest to buy the NBL, and he buys 51% of the league for roughly about $5 million at the time. Yeah, the NBL doesn't want to give it all away. They're not sure what this is going to look like or what's going to happen, but they do this, and he's got full control. So he buys the league, and yeah, like things. It's all about vertical integration. So he says to teams, "Well, you're not doing a very good job with your marketing. I'm taking all that away. We now do the marketing from NBL headquarters. Like all the teams are marketed from the NBL, and this is how the NBL is very different. I'm assuming baseball is the same, but I obviously know more about the NBA. So the NBA, all the teams, the teams are their own entities, and then you've got the league, but basically like the teams run the league, right?
Yeah, correct.
Whereas like
that is the same. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
So the NBL is like you've got the owner that owns the league, and then they sell licenses to the teams, and they allow them to play in there. So it's a little bit different. And so what they're saying is because the league is the league, that he owns the league. He's saying, well, you're not doing marketing very well. I'll take that off you. I do marketing for all the teams. You don't really, you could do better with your merchandise. You don't sell merchandise anymore. We sell all the merchandise. His son that he goes to NBL games with, he says, start your first company, son. He starts up First Ever, which is a uniform company. But, who's their biggest client? The NBL, right? Like so it's all vertical integration. So his son starts a clothing company. The NBL is the primary customer of that. They're making all the uniforms and all of the merchandise for the clubs. That's now, another company that Larry owns or co-owns. And it's all, like I said, vertical integration.
Okay.
It's not this story of, hey, this generous, benevolent benefactor pumped money into here. This was a way for him to bring everything together and get in some very big doors because the NBL, as unprofitable as it ever was, it was always very exciting and interesting to people, right? Like So yeah, I guess I'll throw it back to you guys, but I just wanted to clarify some of those points there, and the short version of what happens over the next 10 years from 2015 to 2025 is that Larry's putting in a whole lot of money. He reestablishes teams he finds he finds quality owners for teams like Brisbane and Sydney that come back into the league. That brings the league to 8 teams, and then he sets his sights. He makes sure that no teams, and since there was one team, Townsville, that dropped out the first year. Since then, and again, this is something he said to me face to face. He's like, his goal, or what he promised to publicly, even as well, it's on record, is that no other team would drop out of the league from here. Yep. And to his credit, it hasn't yet. Like those same 8 teams that were there, they're all there right now. No other team. So, and it's that compound effect. It's that, hey, there's been a team in Brisbane for the last 10 years that's now seeing Brisbane, draw 10,000 people to a game. It's not an overnight thing, right? It's the fact that it's the compound effect, and this is happening ongoing. It's the fact that the Melbourne United's been a successful long-term brand that now they're seeing sellouts pretty much every game, and 12,000 people come to there. Sydney's the same thing. All these teams are benefiting from having this long-term being long-term established in these areas and allowing fan bases to grow to the point where the key is. And I've actually got a podcast where I actually had Larry on the podcast, and we talked about exactly this. This is back in 2000, I would say 16. And I said to him, he said to me, what do we need to do to make this successful? And my answer at the time was, all you need to do is make sure that things are sustainable and the teams remain who they are, and we keep doing 1%ers and growing, because as soon as you've got, like, football's massive in Australia because people are like, I don't know, I'm sure there's probably some similarities. I'll throw it to you guys after this. But in Australia, like, the minute that you're born, like, kids get gifted their Australian football club's scarf. They usually get signed up for a membership at the time, and the kid's like not even 1 year old. Like,
there's lots of that in the US. More with the NFL, which is American football. Like, do you guys call it gridiron?
The NFL's the king right now.
Yeah, the NFL. Yeah, like as soon as a baby's born, they have Eagles gears on, a Cowboys gear or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an event. Yeah.
Yeah. And so most like the Mecca, the Madison Square Garden of Australian football is the MCG, and you can actually buy. There's probably similar comparisons in states, but you can buy an MCG membership, which allows you to see, of Australia's AFL Football League, half of the league play in Melbourne, half of all the best games are like played at that venue. So
Is
rather
that
than having
Melbourne
like,
Cricket Grounds?
yeah, correct,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And so, yeah, the wait list for that's probably around about say like 30 years to get a membership. And so, like
Whoa.
when there's guys that are putting their children name unknown, they're a fetus, like they're signing them up for these memberships. Like that's how ingrained Australian football is here. And so, coming back to my conversation with Larry, I was like, all we need to do is those kids that are attending the basketball now, when we're getting 5,000 people to the games, we need their kids. We need their parents to be bringing them, saying like, oh, I went to the basketball when I was a kid. I'm bringing my kid.
Yeah.
Like, it needs to
Yeah.
be this second, third generation. And now that we're, 10 years down the track, and those 12-year-olds are bringing their 5-year-old, those kids that were 12, 15 then are bringing now their, 5 to 8-year-olds to the games. This is where things are starting to gain traction, where things are at.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been talking for a while, but I'll wrap it up. So that's what's been going on. That's what's happening. That's what's led to the growth. While that's all happening, Larry's got, he's got basketball back on television. It started off where TV stations didn't really view much value in the product. They came up with this strategy, which has been done before. It's not uncommon, but it is uncommon in the world of Australian sports, where it's like, well, we'll broad pay for the broadcast, because that's where TV stations, like, even though the NBL wasn't charging anything for it to be on TV, companies still had to look at, well, do we want to spend all the costs in the trucks going out there? We've got to ship commentators out there, video guys. Like, there's a fair amount of cost,
Yeah.
especially if we're going to be, we're based in a certain city and we've got to go well to all these regional areas, right? So yeah, he's like, I'll cover the costs, and similar sort of thing, right? But when you play it on your stations, we'll also help you generate advertisers, and we get a pretty substantial cut of that advertisement money. So they own, and this is also, now that it's become so successful, it's great because they own all the footage and all the all the content of the NBL, but which will probably have big dividends down the track. But yeah, so he owns all that. That becomes, they start to make a fair amount of money from all the advertising and revenue, and then yeah, that's when it gets to a point where TV companies and things like that are now saying, all right, look, this is pretty good. How about we pay you some rights fees? And that's when the league signs a multi-year deal for $5-10 million there, only the last couple of years, and the NBL and Larry recoup all of the money they've invested up until now.
Yeah. So okay. So I do have a question. That was fascinating, by the way. I want to switch topics a little bit just because it popped into my head. I remember getting into the NBL. Not that I'm a super fan. Around the time that LaMelo Ball came around.
Yep.
And
Yep.
for anybody not listening, because it's a baseball podcast, LaMelo Ball and his brothers were these sort of sensation in the United States, and their dad was really outrageous, and he got a lot of eyeballs. And LaMelo Ball, because there's a one and done rule in the NBA, you can't go straight from high school. You have to do something for a year and then come back. The college route didn't really work. His brother got arrested. It's a whole thing. And so they had to go play somewhere. And so they decided, we're going to go play in Australia. I forget. Did they do Lithuania and then Australia, or Australia then Lithuania?
Yeah, they did Lithuania, and then but their first pro, that was when he was like a teenager. So his first pro contract was Australia.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, think of LaMelo Ball as this excellent talent who has to just wait a year for no reason. And so he goes, I got to go play basketball somewhere. I'm going to do it in Australia. And that was a huge deal. And everybody was like, oh my gosh, this superstar guy is going to come play. He goes and plays a year there. And then he moves on to the NBA. Now he's an all-star. Everybody loves LaMelo Ball. He's really good. My question for you is, how does Australia become that destination? Because right now, I've talked to people we've had them on the podcast where we've talked about the ABL and said it's a fantastic opportunity. It's safe, right? Because right now, if you want to play baseball outside of MLB, you can play in the minor leagues, which isn't the best quality of life. You can go play in Japan or Korea, and there's only a few roster spots. So if you're not good enough, you can't do it.
They're
And then
also
you can go
very
play.
competitive.
Yeah, they're really competitive. Or you can go play in like the Caribbean somewhere, which is you can make money, I guess, and people enjoy it. But the problem is it's not super safe always, depending on where, like it's like Venezuela, right? I guess it's not the Caribbean, but like Venezuela is not a safe place to be, and they don't speak English. So so basically Australia can present itself as, hey, you can come play here and speak English, meet a bunch of people that have a lot of in common like you, is very similar culture, and
Mhm.
it's a safe place to be, and then you can get your name out there. But the problem is you're not going to make any money. And so how do you get the LaMelo Ball thing of saying, hey, because the eyeballs follow LaMelo Ball, right? So how do you get yourself to become the destination to say, come do it here before you make it big?
Yeah, sure. So, LaMelo Ball was probably like 2020, right? So I mentioned that just to paint the picture that Larry's probably had 5 years of rebuilding things in his image. So, we're not talking about the 2,000 seat stadiums. Teams are back in sort of major stadiums. Sure, they might be 10, 12K seaters, and they might only be filling up 5 or 6K of that, but we're at the 5 or 6K mark here, and we're back in proper size stadiums. So, Larry having his own, like I said, it's kind of like a Geico. Geico's renowned for its strategic marketing and that type of thing, right? So Dodo was the same sort of thing. Like Dodo was the company; it had a dodo bird as its mascot. That's why I sort of like say it's kind of similar to the
Sure,
Geico
yeah.
thing and whatever else.
Okay, yeah, that checks out.
And yeah, yeah. So the colorful animated dodo bird and whatever else. So marketing's
Mhm.
kind of something that he used to leverage the growth of dodo, and was a big major part of where the deficiencies were in the NBL and why he took that all off the teams. All the even like social media coordinators and all that was brought into the NBL away from the teams, so it was all from a centralized place. So yeah, so that's all happening, and that's getting things back on track. But Larry's smart enough to know that, and Ethan and I were talking about our combined love of the wrestling business before the podcast, and
Mhm.
I'm a big subscriber to Eric Bischoff, who always has this mantra when he looks at things from a marketing perspective, in terms of you can be three things if you're trying to grow a business. You can be better than the competition, you can be different than the competition, or you can be less than. There's only three things, right? And so you have to sit down as the NBL, and this is what Larry and his team have done. They've said, okay, how do we become better than the NBA? Well, not really going to be. You
It
can't
can't
really
Yeah,
do
it's
that, right?
not gonna happen. Right?
Okay,
Yeah.
so how can we be better than everyone else then? Maybe we could be the second best option, right? And Larry's looked at this and said, well, we could become the second best league in the world in terms of entertainment and value and fan experience. And that's where Larry puts his head. He looks at, like I said, our discussion in 2015 is about how do we ensure that these 15-year-olds, when they turn 25 and they could do their own, and they bring in their kids, so it all becomes focused on kids and families from this stage. So, and this is why the Melbourne Tigers, he rebrands that to Melbourne United, gets cops a lot of flack from it because it sounds like a soccer team, but ultimately what he's trying to do is make this a united family type of a situation there. That team's gone on to lead the way with things in terms of like Pride Round and Multicultural Round, and anyway, all this type of unity type stuff, because it's all about family, kids. This is the
Right.
focus of the team. This is the focus of the franchise. Larry does things like there's fireworks cannons on the top of the basketball hoops, so that whenever there's a 3-pointer, there's fireworks shooting out. There's multiple mascots at any of these games walking around. Anything like this. You walk through the door, there's competitions, there's inflatable bouncy castles, all this type of thing. And this wasn't really prevalent with it. Well, it was never in basketball. It wasn't really prevalent in sports. AFL since seen a lot of this stuff and taken it on board and whatever else now. But basically everything that he can do to make this family friendly, he does, and that's the growth and probably where the success lies in the first 5 years. But then it's like, okay, so now how do we become, same mantra, better or different again? We can't be better in the NBA when it comes to talent, but let's look at, especially when it comes to established talent, but what about in terms of like development talent, right? And this is a bit of a happy accident. It all starts from the Adelaide 36ers. They're struggling for cash at the time, or struggling to, sort of fit everyone in. It's those first couple of years where Larry took over. The point system's still there, so there's still some kinks to be worked out, but they bring in this because they spend big on a couple of big name imports. they had this opportunity through, the coach at the time, Joey Wright. He's American. He has contacts overseas. He's about this guy, Terence Ferguson, high schooler. Same sort of thing. Doesn't qualify for college. He says to, well, why don't you come over here? You're 19 years old, playing the NBL. Not going to see a lot of minutes, but, I'll coach you up, and our whole focus is to get you NBA ready. I mean, comes over, 5 points a game, plays a small role in that team, but does get drafted. Yep. And plays a few seasons there for the Oklahoma City Thunder. What this does is it proves a pathway. And this is at the time before the NIL, name, image, likeness, comes into college. And so what you were just talking about there about guys having options for baseball, the NBL now becomes this situation where, and the NBL go out and proactively start selling it to guys where they're saying, look, you can go to college, but you're going to be one and done, right? Like you're not great, you're not going there for a degree, school's never been your thing, right? Like usually these are kids from like low socioeconomic sort of areas. Why go to play college where you're going to leave after 1 year, and you're not going to make any money at all? On top of that, there's heavy restrictions in terms of how much you can train, how much you can practice, like all those things that that college basketball have to face. Like you can't just go into the gym with a trainer and work out whenever you want. Like there's limits on that because they want you to make sure that you're prioritizing your education at college. So you can come over here. Sure, we can only give you, at the time initially, they're saying we can only give you, say, maybe 500K, but what you can do, and this is what Terence Ferguson do, is that by doing that as well, you're not in college, you can sign sponsorship deals. So Terence Ferguson coming over, sure, maybe only played for 500 grand or something like that, but also was signed by Adidas, I think, for 1.5 million or something like that. So this, you're going to an English-speaking country, like you sort of said, climate's great, like the NBL also strategically has structured its season. So it's, because it's in the summer, there's a lot of people, to be honest, probably for the NBL to have success, it probably should have gone back to winter for those points I mentioned before. But what they do is, instead of going back to winter, they say, all right, we'll have a really short season so that we finish before the NBA and we finish before Europe's finished. And so what players can do, like I sort of said, all those hurdles, other countries, cold weather, non-English speaking, I can come over to Australia, whether I'm a young guy or not, even if I'm an importer, I can come over to Australia, I can play 5 months there, I can earn decent money, English, warm environment, and then the season finishes, I can still get a second gig for that same season and play the back end in Europe. Or I can play, I can even go back to the G League or get an NBA deal. And there's been guys, numerous guys that have finished an NBL season and then gone and played in the NBA. Like probably one of the most prominent ones, probably like Andrew Bogut went back to Golden State after he played in the NBL, that type of thing. So, but there's been plenty of other guys do that. There's a guy just here from Cairns who finished up and played again. He signed a deal with Golden State to finish up their season there. So it creates this alternative to both college players. Because it's like, well, if I'm only going to be one and done and I want to just work on my game every day, this is a better option for me. The LaMelo Ball thing, he went and played at Illawarra. Literally, you walk out of that stadium, the beach is there. Like, the ocean is right there, right?
That's an easy sell.
Yeah, exactly. And Australia's got the warm climate. Everyone speaks English. So, yeah, all these things sort of come together, and the NBL then strategically comes up with this idea from these happy accidents. And it's like, well, if we we can be a better option to a niche of college basketball players, because if you only want to do 1 year and you're not good at school, or you're going to have academic issues and you want to start earning money now, right? All those low socioeconomic kids, why would you go to college? Why wouldn't you come here? Yeah. And so that starts the Next Stars program. They run that for 1 year. A couple of kids come through that. Brian Bowen, he's at the Sydney Kings. And a few others. They get drafted, second round sort of stuff. But that proves the model. And then the next year they're like, let's go hard at this. That's when they put the money into LaMelo Ball.
Yeah.
So they use that system that's proven success. They bring LaMelo Ball. That brings all the eyeballs. Like, LaMelo Ball's talking about the NBL and the Illawarra Hawks on ESPN. The games are being broadcast on YouTube. Like the NBL in terms of like worldwide visibility, that LaMelo game, his first, second game, whatever it would have been, that would have to hold the record for the most viewed game in Australian basketball history still today. So yeah, that then launches that, and the NBL wakes up and says, well, we can double down on this. We can be the best option for those college kids that don't want to go to college for all those reasons. Now, the NIL agreement coming in has derailed that a bit because it's no longer, in fact, the reverse is happening. We've got young Australian kids that are now being lured to college teams because they're paying them more than what NBL teams are.
Right.
So things have changed, but the NBL Next Stars program, if you've been keeping track, still alive and well, still producing a lot of talent, but ultimately who it's became, who the audience has become is that, and what a lot of people don't know is that if I'm the best player in France, and we saw this with Victor Wembanyama, for example, or a few other guys, but if I'm from Europe and I go to college, I don't qualify for NIL money. It's only American college players that get NIL money.
Okay,
So
I didn't know that.
So the Next Stars program in Australia over the last 2 or 3 years, it has pivoted. No longer do we really get US players, and or very rarely do we get US players, and I can't even think of one from the last couple of years like your LaMelo Balls. Now it's those Asia, Europe type players who this still works for them because it's like if I go to college, I'm not making any money. All those same limitations occur.
Yeah, Alex Sarr, yeah.
Alex Sarr, Hugo Besson. There's a whole range of other guys that have come through there.
So, Dan, that was a fascinating breakdown of the growth of the NBL. And I think, I would absolutely adore if the ABL can become this one day. But there's two problems. One, they don't have a Larry Kesselman yet, I'm hoping.
At the moment.
And it sounds, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like none of this would be possible, or at least not nearly on the scale that it is without Larry Kesselman.
Without someone similar, correct.
Yeah, without a figure like that, which right now they don't have. And two, you have to survive the almost bankruptcies, the almost collapses, right? Which, if the NBL had folded completely at any of those points, nothing, this whole timeline would never have unfolded. So basically, Australian baseball has a two-part issue right now that they have to solve. And it sounds, and I'm really glad you broke down the whole Larry Kesselman saga, I guess, because I didn't know any of that. I really thought it was just a rich benefactor. And so it sounds to me like the NBL really benefited from like a centralized command structure, basically, of one guy coming over and saying, hey, I'm making things up, but saying, hey, Melbourne sucks at marketing and Sydney sucks at drawing whatever. I don't know. I know how to do it, so I'm going to have all of them do it. The ABL does not have that. And so one of the problems that the Melbourne owner was saying was that, and obviously we're only getting his viewpoint, but he basically was saying he was like, we are the best at doing it. And we are not making money, but we're not losing that much money. And the way that we're doing it, we think we can make work. But the problem is I'm only one of 6 teams, and the other 5 teams are not holding up their end of the bargain. And so when they're dragging down the rest of the league, I can't make it work. Again, that's only one guy's viewpoint, but it sounds like they would really benefit from if they could have one Larry Kesselman in charge of everything and have everybody, rowing in the same direction, then it works. So how do you get everybody on the same page? And then, like you said with the NBL and like almost collapsing, how do you just avert the crisis right now and say if we can just hang in there?
Yeah. Important to also point out that it's probably less to do with everyone hanging. I mean, obviously you want to sort of keep some type of, the historical clubs that are there and whatever else. But when Larry took over the NBL, besides Perth, really the teams that are your key programs, like I said, Sydney had only were basically non-existent. Brisbane had dropped out of the league. Melbourne were playing in Melbourne, which used to have 3 or 4 NBL teams, had dropped down to 1, and they were playing in a 2,000-seat stadium. So, the teams that were there are not the ones that have gone on to yield the majority of the success for the league down the road. Melbourne, Perth has remained, sort of similar to the Melbourne's ABL. Melbourne has continued. Perth has continued to be at the very top echelon in one of the premier programs throughout that time. But Melbourne is also became one of those major players. Sydney now, like Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane are Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth are probably your top three now. Those two out of those three were non-existent almost when Larry took over. So. But yeah, how do we get there? Now, this is what I think is, going to be the tough thing for the ABL in terms of the Larry Kesselman figure has to probably come into play. He has to be able to offset his losses. Like I said, I don't have detailings on that, but knowing the type of projects that Larry is involved with and the doors that he's opening there, I'd be very surprised if he wasn't able to offset any of the losses there through the gained contacts or work generated through the interest of the NBL with Asian property investors. And so, sure, I'm losing $5 million here, but I'm making $10 million here or whatever it might be, or even if it's $5 million, I'm evening out.
So it was more of a business expense than a passion project.
Exactly.
I mean, it really was both, but it wasn't just that he was like, well, I'm losing money, but having fun. It was like, no, I'm getting some out of this.
Exactly. Right. It's a marketing strategy, right? Like if I'm a property investment company, I mean, I could run some Google ads to try and get some leads, or I could buy an NBL program. I could buy a National Basketball League and get some leads from there. Like, it's just an opportunity to get in front of those people who are going to invest in that type of those type of projects when it comes to the financial value of those. The second part that I think is going to be problematic for the ABL is that now that Larry did that, and we have seen the growth there, the Next Stars program has been a big part of that. So whether there's some type of way that the ABL could position itself as being a better than option when it comes to it. Doesn't have to be better for all. Like I said, the Next Stars program in the NBL, initially, it was a better option, but only to those college players that had a chance to reach the NBL, only wanted to stay for, weren't that great academically and was going to have trouble or find it difficult to be in college, wanted to get out after a year and had the NBA on their sites and wanted to start earning money straight away. If that was you, the NBL became a better option than the college system. And so that criteria would be something the ABL would have to develop. Like I said, it can morph. The NBL has now shifted the Next Star program to target more European players because all the college guys are making money from the NIL and all those things are there. But they have to follow that same blueprint to be, how can we be, who's out there that we could be a better option towards, like. And then the third part is that now that the NBL has got there, it's seeing success through, it's built a team in Brisbane. It's got a team in Tasmania now. There's a second team in Melbourne, and there's more expansion coming on the way. But for the most part, any future expansion of the NBL is going to follow pretty much the same blueprint as the Tasmania club, and this is where I see it being really challenging for baseball. Now, how Tasmania as a franchise became successful, and Brisbane to a part, is that Larry said, "Well, I can't find anyone to buy these teams. The teams don't really make a lot of money, same as ABL, right? So I'll buy the team." Yeah. Larry was actually the owner of Brisbane. Larry was the owner of Tasmania for the initial stages of those programs. So. And this is, again, we'll probably get to the end of it here, but this is where things today, right now for the NBL, things are a little bit contentious. There's a lot going on there because we talk about vertical integration. Larry's built the NBL to a standpoint where there's a lot of, I guess, double dipping or a lot of double standards where, like, hypothetically, here's a scenario here, which is one of the major points of where things have sort of reached a climax between the teams and Larry, the league owner, is that you were a part owner of the Melbourne United. During that time, you were trying to buy a bus transport company, which would go on to become the bus transport company for the whole NBL. And the owner of that bus transport company is an NBL referee that's refereeing Melbourne United games.
Okay.
Conflict of interest.
Conflict of
Yeah.
interest, exactly right. And you know, like teams are also coming back. Like, sure, great, like you're doing our uniforms and things now, but we don't make any money from that. So it's great that you've built things up and brought all this focus to the league, but the things, those grass level avenues for us, you know, whether it be ticketing, merchandising, all that type of stuff, like you do all that. We don't make any money from that, really. If we don't get like you've got the money coming in from the TV, which Larry has just started to give some of that to the teams, I think. But ultimately, now things are coming to a head because everything's under Larry's watch, and it's becoming extremely difficult for teams to make money now that things have got as big as they are. So, plus there's multiple conflicts of interest. How do you own the league, instruct the referees, own multiple teams? Those teams are playing each other in the finals. You know, you've got one team, you know, doing this, one team doing that you own. You know, the fact that Melbourne United was always the team that Larry primarily owned, and they've won. They've been super, super successful over the last 10 years because of that. You know, there's been mutual, you know, numerous things that have come up around that. So that's where things are now. But let me jump back. So the Tasmania experiment, what happened there is that they used to have a team in the league, like I said, dropped out in '96. They were one of those teams, and and Larry, and they were also trying to get, like, there's no major sports team there, so it was a hotbed to do something, and they were keen to the state was keen to do something. So Larry said to them, well, the stadium that you've got there that you used to play in, it needs a lot of work. What I propose that we do is that you sell me the business precinct around the stadium. In return, I'll put an NBL team there, and you'll also upgrade the stadium so that it meets all the standards and, you know, what it needs to. So millions of dollars was spent by the government on the stadium. Larry was giving a large chunk of or was able to purchase for a very low cost, or even given to a certain degree, the business area or the real estate area around the stadium. So what happens when you've got if you've got land or a property that's near a stadium that just got done up, that just got a professional sports team put there, that just have all these other businesses, eateries, restaurants, hotels, all set up shop there because you want to make it accessible and leverage off all the the 4,000 or 5,000 people going to Tasmania basketball games. All of a sudden, that property value goes up. So much like McDonald's, right? How does McDonald's make its money? Not from burgers, from real estate. Yeah. So McDonald's
you can
makes
be fooled by their prices lately. Yeah.
The way things are, yeah. But yeah, if anyone's seen that movie, The Founder, right? Like the McDonald's framework is what is being employed by the NBL for expansion, where it's like, this is a real estate investment. We buy this highly valuable piece of property. We then build a McDonald's there. We find someone to run it. That person then pays us rent, that pays us off for the money, and we own this, highly profitable piece of land while someone else pays us for it. This is the same sort of process. And so Larry, right now, this has become so successful that the regional teams are now at a spot where they can compete. Your Melbournes, your Sydneys, they are still renting these Madison Square Garden, type stadiums there, but they're able to draw your 15,000 people there to fill that out, 12,000 people to fill that out. We're never going to be able to do that in those regional areas. So that divide that I started this conversation with, it's always handcuffed Australian basketball's growth. We've overcome that by saying, well, because Larry's a property investor, we can overcome this. You give me the property. I'll put the basketball team there. Property values will go up. I make money. You make money. Everyone kind of wins. And so now we're starting to see, and over the next few years, there's plans to put teams back in Gold Coast. There's plans to put team back in Canberra, as well as a whole range of other sort of locations. Maybe a second team in Perth. But I'll guarantee you that all of those teams only happen through some type of real estate deal with Larry that allows him to, where it's like, government, you give me this cheap or for free or whatever it is, I'm going to put a team there. When the team's there, all your property goes up. You benefit, I benefit. It's a deal like that. So bring it back to baseball. I don't know how you do that with baseball stadiums. Like a baseball stadium.
That kind of is a thing in the United States, and people hate it, where a team Like this just happened with the Oakland Athletics, the formerly Oakland Athletics, where
Yeah.
it's gotten to a point where the team can be such a big part of the local economy that they can sort of hold the city hostage and say, if you don't give us 500 million, 700 million, whatever dollars to renovate or create a new stadium, we're going to leave and take all our jobs with it and whatever. And then the
Hmm.
city's stuck with this problem of going, well, then we lose a bunch of jobs and we lose a bunch of tax revenue and whatever. So, okay, fine, we'll give you the $700 million. And then it never turns out the way the city wants it to. And they always end up losing money. But then you have to do it to keep your team because if you lose your team, everybody's pissed off because people like
Right.
sports more than politics. And so you're going to lose every election you're in if you're the guy that lost the team. And people hate that. And
Yeah.
that's like a huge problem in sports right now. And I don't think I want that to happen anywhere else. So I don't want that to
I,
happen to you. I don't want sports and politics to get too mixed up because then you get these scumbag owners who want to pull the rug out every time they don't get enough public funding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think politics in Australia is a little bit different. Those things you've mentioned do exist here for sure. It would be a lesser degree in Australia, but they still exist for
Yeah,
sure.
people seem a lot nicer.
Oh,
Be chiller. Mhm.
we're just a much younger country, which means we don't have we don't have the the underlying whether it be to do with religion or sports is a form of religion, right? Where you guys are like we
Mhm.
don't really have too much of that. So yeah, I mean for baseball, and again something which is only going to be a thing, even if it does boom and get popular, it's only going to be a thing for one generation of people. Realistically, like yeah, it would take a very long time for us to reach the
Yeah.
type of stuff that you're talking about. But it's
Yeah.
Yeah,
there.
so
It's
it sounds
it's
to me
there.
like from what you're saying that the NBL is now well past the surviving point and they're thriving, right? And they're flourishing, which is awesome. I'm really happy.
Right.
Yeah,
The
teams are to the point where teams are profitable now. Like it kind of when Larry took over, it was like the NBA in the 80s. Again, I use the NBA a lot because it's my only sort of reference point, or the
Sure.
90s
Hmm.
probably more so, where teams back then were losing money or not really making much money, but the team values were going through the roof, right?
Hmm.
Right.
And now things have kind of flipped for the NBA. So the NBL kind of the same once Larry took over. Teams weren't really making a lot of money, but the team values were going through the roof. Like I said, Larry bought the whole league for we bought half the league for 5 million. He then bought another half of it later for maybe a total of 8 or 9 million or whatever it might be, 51% or whatever it was. And now you've got teams that are selling their licenses for like 40 million. I think the Perth Wildcats just sold for 45 million. So
Oh,
individual teams are now worth 40 million, 35 million, depending on where you are, and how big your population is and whatnot. And Larry bought the league for a total of 5 million. So
Yeah.
uh,
right.
he's pumped a lot of money in. I think roughly he's probably pumped in maybe 5 or so million each year, or at least sort of 2 to 5 million each year to with the marketing and all the things that happen with that. But like I said, I think a lot of it's offset with his real estate. So what that looks like, I'm not too sure. But yeah, now it's a point where the NBL's got a massive TV deal, massive exposure, attendance is through the roof. So yeah, now we've reached the point where, we saw the same in the NBA where, players have sort of turned around and said, well, you're making so much money, obviously this is where the player strikes come into with the NBA and things. Things are so good now, we deserve, things need to be a bit better for us. And that's where
Hmm.
NBL teams are. Things are so good, teams are basically saying things. And again, this is only the last sort of 6 months, but a number of NBL teams have come back and said, well, you're not all the money that you're making from all the tickets and the merchandising. It's a bit blurry. It's not really clear how much you're making, and we don't like that. And also, we're not able to make as much money from it. And
Right.
this whole thing needs a review. You own teams, but then you're buying companies from referees while they're refereeing your team, and
Yeah.
there's all these so over the last 6 months, Larry's sold out of all his teams. I mean, he's also in the media been saying quite clearly that all the noise from the teams is unwarranted and it's a bit of a distraction and they're overblowing it. But he's very quickly sold out of all the teams he either owned or part owned. So there must be where there's smoke, there's fire, right? There must be a little bit of truth there. Otherwise, you
Right.
wouldn't have sold out of all those teams. But now Larry,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he doesn't own any shares in any NBL teams now. But yeah, there's a whole heap of issues around teams just wanting to have more clarity around where the money's going, whether they're getting their fair share, and but again, it's only when the league becomes successful and profitable and thriving that those type of things happen. Yeah, so just backing up what you said, Ethan, like it has moved into that thriving position, and where teams can now look at those types of things.
Yeah, it feels like the DJ Khaled meme with the I'm suffering from success with the with basketball in Australia right now. I think for ABL for baseball, I think what I kind of identified from what you were saying earlier about how basketball sort of dug itself out of this hole. It sounded like there was like sort of two arms of the strategy that they used. There was like the financial side with Larry, where he's like, "Listen, I got all this capital, I can backstop things. I think I have a way that I can make this work out for me too, so I'm willing to get into it. Turn it
Yep.
into, we're going to tie it into real estate. We're going to vertically integrate it with the companies that I already own. We're going to make it work that way." And then there was the other thing that you mentioned that I think ABL still struggles with, but is maybe more accessible right out of the gate, which is there's like this culture element where you were like, it has to be the sort of thing that like fathers take their sons to, and it becomes like a family thing. And that's how you sort of spin up your fan base. And then it builds over time, like you said. And like, it doesn't feel like ABL necessarily ever got over that hump either. And it's like, yeah, you know, it's not something that you can necessarily do where you can just be like, okay, guys, we're going to get a billionaire to come in. He's going to take care of all the financial risk and turn us profitable in 10 years' time. It's like, great. What billionaire?
Right.
But
Crickets.
like the culture stuff you can do. And that, sounds more like, I forget what it was called, but the program that you mentioned about guys who were like one and done for
Next
college
Stars.
basketball can come
Next
over
Stars,
and
yeah.
play here and, and it'd be a better option in certain ways for certain people. This feels like the sort of thing that the ABL can do that they haven't really found a way to do yet. They kind of dabbled in it because a few of the teams partnered with MLB organizations.
Yeah,
And they
that's
got
what I was
some,
going to say. Where
yeah.
the ABL has kind of a leg up. You can weigh in on this, Dan. I don't know if the NBL has something like this. The ABL has a thing where they have certain contracts with teams, or I don't know if it's like legal or not, or just sort of a handshake agreement. But like the Adelaide Giants are partnered with the Philadelphia Phillies. So every year the Phillies, baseball has, I don't know exactly what it is in Australia, but call it a 25-man roster, maybe 30. They send over maybe 8 guys every year. And what's important about that is the Phillies, this super rich, American team, will pay the Adelaide Giants to house their guy, to pay him to play, and then they'll give the team a cut. Right. So the guy might be making $700 a week, something Australian, and the team will be giving, the Phillies will probably be giving the Giants like $1,000, right? Because you got to house him and everything, and they find him work, and you only play like 4 days a week. And so it's like the Phillies win because their guy gets to go down and get extra reps. The player wins because he gets paid to play baseball somewhere that's cool, and then the Australian team wins because they don't have the cost of having to pay the player, and they got higher level talent than just some guy off the streets of Australia. So it's like everybody wins. But the problem is it's kind of haphazard, and I think it's just sort of which teams have connections, because the Adelaide Giants have a bunch of guys, and then some of their coaches coach for the Phillies. They have some Phillies guys come and play down there, that sort of thing. The Brisbane Bandits have a deal with the Brewers, and I think they have some guys coaching for the Brewers, and the Perth Heat have a deal with the Rays, and that's been really, really solid. But then like the Sydney Blue Sox just don't have anything going on. And what I mean? They might get like a couple guys from Korea. And so it's like it comes back to the thing of like you need a guy at the top. Like you need a Larry coordinating everything. Because if you could have every team, like there's 30 MLB teams and there's 6, well now there's gonna be maybe 3 or 4. But at the time there were 6 ABL teams. So it'd be perfect if you could say 5 MLB teams for this guy, 5 MLB teams for that guy. Each MLB team will give you 2 guys, that's 10 each. Perfect. You know what I mean? That's 10 imports. You still have 15 Australian guys. Whatever. I'm making stuff up. You know what I mean? But there's no cohesion, And so it's like, does somebody just need to get smacked and say like, figured out? Or, you know what I mean? Like, how do you get everybody on the same page?
Well, I guess it comes down to, because I mean, yeah, we're even seeing similar things in, like in wrestling, that like the WWE is paying their wrestlers to wrestle elsewhere just so they have first rights to them if they, decide to pick them up in the future. And I guess it comes down to, in that scenario, like whether MLB teams really see a benefit to doing that. Like, does that become a pipeline for them, and that type of thing? And yeah, I don't know how that works. There are, I mean, I don't think these are major play factors, but is a lot of other factors at play as well that has seen Australian basketball do well. So first off, Australia has connections with a lot of NBA teams, initially through a guy called Brett Brown, who came out
Sixers
to
coach.
Yeah. So he started off coaching in the NBL with the Melbourne Tigers, and even coached the Australian team for a little bit. Went up and basically started working for free for the Spurs and Greg Popovich, and then turned into one of their coaches and coached the Phillies coach, all that type of stuff. So that kind of started one of the major connections, and a lot of the coaches or players that have either gone from the NBL to NBA or NBA to NBL have sort of come from that pipeline, which has also coincided with it being a really strong. I mean, just it's been luck, because if you look at NBA coaches just in general, the amount of NBA coaches that didn't come from the Greg Popovich pipeline is probably like 1 out of 3 coaches is kind of from that Spurs Greg Popovich program anyway, right? So, so there's that sort of luck that we tapped into there, and there's a lot of back and forth that comes from there. The other thing, and I think that this might be something that the baseball could leverage off in terms of that Australian US relationship, is that while we're behind America in most things, one place that we're not is like health sciences, like your physios, chiropractors. You guys are way behind that, and most sports teams.
I totally believe that. By the way,
it is, yeah.
As an American,
if you have a look at the sports science teams on pretty much any pro team in the States, they're littered with Australians. So when it comes to that type of stuff, sports rehab, that type of thing, Australia is one of the countries leading the way. And so, like, again, I'm just throwing out an idea here, but if you were to say, well, MLB teams, they want their development players to play somewhere where they can keep an eye on them easily. They're talking with guys that speak English. They're happy because they're in a warm climate. There's decent money there somehow, some way. And because we're concerned about their injuries or their injury prevention, which again, the health sciences and all that type of thing, sports sciences, why Australia is in front of that. Big part of it is we're very proactive when it comes to injury prevention, or just medicine in general. America is very reactive, right? Like when you get it, we'll give you this medicine or we'll give you this operation. Whereas Australia is a lot more proactive in terms of like, you need to be doing these exercises and seeing a physiotherapist so that you don't get a bad back that forces you to have to take all these, pain medications and all that type of stuff. So, this is just an example, but these are things that do exist, and maybe, that would be an example of a niche that the MLB could tap into with Australia that makes it a more viable option, as an example.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I work with a guy who played in Australia for a few years. He played baseball there, and I asked him what drew him to Australia at one point, and he cited the healthcare first, like right out of the gate. He was like, healthcare. He's like, I would move back there in a second for the healthcare system in Australia. So
that's the healthcare system, which is also massively different, but it's a totally separate thing. So we lead the way in terms of sports sciences, chiros, physios, all that type of stuff. But no matter what happens, I can walk into a hospital tomorrow and it's free healthcare, right? Free medical, that type of thing. So
I imagine that's probably superior in terms, like in the baseball world, that's probably superior to the system in a lot of like Caribbean countries, for instance.
That's what I said. Like, and I'm just throwing out hypotheticals, but if I was let's say that I'm a player who's got a promising MLB career in front of me, I'm not quite ready. But I had a major injury in college or something like that, and I want to make sure that that's maintained. Well, then it would make sense for me to come and play in Australia for those types of reasons.
Yeah.
Here's like the hang up in every one, though. You said, there's pretty girls and they speak English, and they're the beaches and everything, and there's good money somehow.
We love American accents.
Yeah. Is that true?
That's very true. Yeah.
Really?
Sure. I think everybody loves accents that aren't theirs. That feels like the way it works.
Because like if you had an Australian accent in America, like people are all over you.
Yeah, but
It's
but
probably
if we
because
go to England though, they tell us to get out because there's too many of us. So it just depends.
Oh.
see like
Well,
just
yeah, but
as an
it's England, so
American,
you're like, absolutely. You know what? I had the same thought.
like as an American, like my accent doesn't sound cool. But anyway, but like the hang up though is you said, and there's good money somehow. No, there's
Yeah,
not. That's the
Yeah.
problem. And so my hang up, I love your idea of saying, it's back to the Eric Bischoff, right? How do we can't be better than MLB. We can't even be better than the Caribbean because there's, Venezuela, and the Dominican Republic, all these are light years, their baseball programs are light years ahead of Australia. But
Yeah.
what are we good at? We're good at healthcare. Okay, so how do we leverage that? The problem is, I don't think these people are going to work for free, and that's a super expensive proposition. Is to say, hey, come and rehab all these athletes, right? Like you can't, you know what I mean? Like that's how do you get that?
Well, again, we're all talking hypotheticals, right? Because this might
Yeah,
not even
yeah.
be the best pathway to do it. But
Yeah,
let's say hypothetically, again, I pointed out that America is very reactive when it comes to healthcare. If there was an MLB team who prioritized healthcare and wanted to be proactive with healthcare, then it would make sense if, like, rather than send them, they probably got two options, which they could, have them play a D2 sort of a situation there, and they could bring over a heap of Australians or highly qualified medical staff there, or is it cheaper for them? Rather than doing all that, is it cheaper just to pay for a plane ticket to Australia? There's someone there that they trust to look after their guys, and they send them through to that program, and things happen from there. So
yeah,
there are ways to there. Like again, I don't know enough of baseball. I'm just giving an example of something that could fit into the how are we different or better than them
yeah,
type of scenario.
Right, yeah.
And that would be one. So, but it would take an MLB team to prioritize, the healthcare and longevity of their players, and if they did, well, then yeah, I mean, it's possible that it could work that way.
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that
That's a
would
great idea.
naturally flow into because MLB teams are very concerned about the level of competition that their guys are seeing because it's very easy to like take steps backwards if you're playing lower competition. That will flow naturally into okay, well, if we're sending, if you're the Phillies and we're sending Andrew Painter over to Australia because
He's an Uber prospect, by the way, Dan.
yeah,
Just so you know.
but he's a guy who has a little bit of an injury history at this point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
If we are sending Andrew Painter over to Australia, we want to make sure that he's pitching against guys who we're actually going to make him have to get better rather than dudes who he just destroys with no difficulty.
Yeah.
You will
Yeah.
probably start seeing a situation like that. I would think they would become invested in like, okay, well, let's get the level of talent in the Australian Baseball League up so that we can feel good about sending guys over there from like a talent perspective instead of just, go over there and like go to the doctor and hang out on the beach.
yeah,
And all Australia's basketball success in the 80s and 90s came from that. All those Americans that came over as teachers, those were the best players in the league in the early 80s and whatnot. That increased the level. Like back then, we do have a rule now where there's only 3 imports per team, but back then there was 0 import restrictions because there wasn't that many Americans around, right? So there would be teams that just like littered with NBA players with Australian players. Well, some of them were NBA players, but American players that would come in and having, Andrew Gaze is one of Australia's, he's kind of like our Michael Jordan type of thing. And
Yeah.
he's been a big proponent of saying like, I've got no issue having no import rules because having all those Americans that would come over would only make our Australian talent better because they've got to compete for their jobs. So
Yeah,
it's the same
right.
thing.
it bridges the gap. Yeah, Dan, I don't want to keep you for another meeting. I mean, we could if you wanted to, but I know you got it's nighttime for me, but you got a whole day ahead of you. But this has been fantastic. I think we're going to make this part of like a longer, we're going to have a bunch of other people on to talk about this like crisis in the ABL and then probably release them one by one, but I'll let you know either way. I'll send it to you when it comes up. But this has been fantastic. Please do 2 things for me before you're done. 1, plug everything you got. I want people to go check out your stuff because it's fantastic. 2, grade our American accents 1 to 10. Like if you just ran into me on the streets of where are you, Sydney? I think.
Melbourne, yeah.
Okay, Melbourne. Yeah.
Okay.
If you just saw
Even
me
better.
walk around the streets of Melbourne, how like out of 10, how good is my American accent?
Like Ethan, yours is like A1 typical American accent.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, actually, here, let me put it this way: how much of a panty dropper is my American accent?
Trump is a bit divisive right now, so it'll be one of those things where, like, the pennies will either drop or they'll run away very quickly. So, but that's a
So it'd
50-50
be hit
strike
or
rate,
miss if I
right?
walked up to a girl and were like, "Take off your pants. Let me see." Yeah, it wouldn't go well.
Exactly right. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And
Ooh.
and then Tom, yeah, like because he's got this whole Eastbound and Down vibe going on. So it's
Whoa.
it's a it's a little bit alien to the Australian ladies here, but yeah,
Okay.
like to me this is
Wait,
like
is that better or worse though?
well
Or
that
just
that
it's not greater in the competition or less in the competition. It's just different
well
in the
It's
it's
just
competition.
going to be
different.
different,
True.
yeah, and those
True.
it's different. It works with someone, right? But no, like Tom has got. I reckon Tom would do all right though, because it's that whole we don't even when we do get Americans here, like I said, they're atypical. They're usually New York or something like that. Like I don't know, Tom's got a borderline Louisiana thing going on about him, so he can.
Really?
Yeah,
Because if
I've
I, as
never
an
gotten that in
American,
my life.
yeah,
Wow.
as an American, if I met somebody from Louisiana, they sound nothing like Tom. Like not
yeah,
at
yeah,
all.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
that's also probably like I would assume there's a difference between like right in the like Bogan accents and then super like the super different kind of but to
Yeah,
a lot of Americans it
Queensland's
sounds
real bogan. Queensland, like Melbourne and Sydney, are kind of like your New York, and then yeah, Queensland's kind of like your
that's like
yeah,
the
that'd be
South kind of, right?
yeah. Oh,
mhm.
it's more yeah, it's like a bogan type of thing. It's more yeah, it's like Florida type stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we would be able to hear somebody be like, yeah, you know what? That's a Queensland guy. Like I would just be like Australia.
Yeah.
Like
Now, see,
same
now,
thing.
now you
So
didn't ask for this, but I'm going to give you a grade. I'd say you're like an 8.5, 9 out of 10. You're not quite everything I want out of an Australian accent, and I'll tell you why.
well, wait,
I would
what are you
love.
missing?
No, you have a fantastic accent, and Dan, I want you to know you're a good-looking guy. Your hair's doing very well, as we talked about.
put some time into it. Yeah,
You would
exactly.
be very successful in American bars, but. I would really love like a nice like Steve Irwin like crikeys out of you, and we haven't gotten
That's
there.
Queensland. That's
Yeah,
Queensland.
Yeah.
that's why you're not. That's why you're not a 10 out of 10 for me.
Yeah.
No, I'm
Dan,
gonna
I,
argue
I
with
like you
you.
a lot. I don't like you in that way. You're not what I'm looking for in a man. Okay.
I'm gonna argue with you on this. I don't
Well,
want to see that because I feel like that's just playing into okay, Steve Irwin put Australia on the map for a lot of people. What if I just sound like Steve Irwin? Like, no, you gotta do
It'd be
your own
hacky.
thing.
Yeah.
Do your
Yeah.
own
well,
thing.
because this is probably before your time, but you got to realize that there was a film that came out of Australia. It's pretty much like Australia's first major film called Crocodile Dundee. Do you guys
Sure.
know
Yeah,
that?
that's what I was
Have
thinking of.
seen
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Have
yeah, yeah.
seen it. Yeah.
So, yeah, Steve Irwin, obviously, probably, I mean, he's from Queensland. They talk like that for the most part, anyway. But did
Right.
borrow a fair bit from the whole Crocodile Dundee US affinity because that film, like that was the second biggest film in America in 1984 out of like of the entire box office. So for a
Right.
small
People
little
like him.
Australian film like that to do that was pretty like unheard of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people like, dude, have you heard about this place, Australia?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've
It's
actually never seen it, but apparently when they first released it in the US, I think they dubbed a whole heap of the voices with US voice actors and things like that. So I haven't seen that one.
oh
Oh, I didn't
Uh,
know.
wait, they did?
yeah, yeah,
Why?
and then changed it around. I don't know. It makes no sense when it's
Oh.
the
Now
whole
I want to
thing's just
see
a fish
both
out of water
versions and
movie.
like compare them. But Dan, the clock's running down. Thank you for putting up with our chicanery. You're a wonderful
Yes,
man. You're
thank you.
very good
No worries,
looking.
guys.
I date you in a heartbeat. Um,
Hell
I
yeah.
but
see a real future between me and Tom as well.
but Dan, please go ahead because we only got like a minute and a half left. Go ahead and plug everything that you want people to check out.
Sure, guys. So yeah, again, if you're keen to hear more about Australian basketball, that's really all we talk about. So it's either players, coaches, administrators from the NBL, or those Australian people that have gone over into the NBA. Recent guests were who have we had? We've had Adam Caporn, who has just become the Australian Boomers coach, but was coaching, is still G League coach there for the Nets. We've had Jordan Hunter recently, centre for the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. Obviously, any of the legends from back in the day, Luke Longley, Andrew Bogut, Matthew Dellavedova, Paddy, these are all guys that have been on the show before. So if that's in your wheelhouse, AussieHoopla.com is the website. We've got profiles on every player who have ever played on an Australian basketball court there, as well as, plenty of podcasts, all those guys. But at Aussie Hoopla on Instagram, at Aussie Hoopla on Twitter, Facebook, yada, yada, yada. But if a few of you are interested, keen to have my voice in your earballs.
You're
Oh, yeah, get
spectacular.
over there.
Yeah, as an American, I love hearing your voice. Dan, this has been amazing, man. Thank you so much for sharing everything, all your knowledge, and thank you for being like a little bit homoerotic with us. I've enjoyed that part.
Yeah,
This has
that
been
matches our
awesome,
vibe.
man.
I have no doubt that's what they'll subscribe for. So get into it.
Yeah, I think our subscribers are going to grow from like 51 to like 55 after this.
Cool, guys. If
Great.
again, like don't know much about baseball, or something comes up, reach out. Always happy to lend a hand.
Sounds good. I really appreciate
All
it, man. Have a good rest of your day.
See you,
Thank
boys.
you.
Thanks a lot, Dan.